Powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. Now, live from inside the Matt Black Kia Studios. It's Football at 4.
Football at 4 is powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. Adam Caplan's here. On Wednesday, Adam and I went through the Eagles free agent offensive looks. Today, we'll see who's on defense and some options that could be targeted in free agency, which starts on March the 15th. Let's bring Adam Caplan in from the Inside the Birds podcast, which will have a very good look at the offseason as well. But Adam is here on this Football Friday edition of Football at 4, and he joins us now on the Sports Bash 97.3 ESPN. What's going on, Adam?
Yeah, Mike, when we were together Tuesday, we kind of outlined it. The offense, there are not a lot of tough decisions there. I don't see Miles Sanders being an extremely tough decision. It's just a matter of what he wants and what they're willing to pay. But defense is challenging. We know they've identified C.J. Gardner-Johnson as their top priority, and they're going to do all they can to keep him. But there are going to be some tough decisions here. It's Hargrave, do you pay him? I know a lot of fans don't think they'll bring back Hargrave. I'm aware that's out there. What are they going to do with T.J. Edwards? We'll get through that. And, again, they have some decisions at cornerback as well. So all three levels of the defense, Mike, they've got decisions coming. No
question. They've got a lot of tough decisions on defense. But let's look if they lose some options to replace as well. Fletcher Cox, Javon Hargrave, Linval Joseph, and Sue. All four of those guys are approaching the wrong side of 30, and all four potentially could not be back.
Yeah, so Cox and Hargrave. Hargrave is 30 now. Linval Joseph and Sue. Sue's the oldest of the group. And you don't have to worry about signings. If they want to bring back one of the two of the older guys, Sue or Joseph, you could wait. It doesn't really matter. You could do that closer to training camp. Heck, these guys both sign in the middle of the season, as we know. But the question is, will they bring back one of or both, Cox and Hargrave? We've said for a couple of months now we expect one, not both back. Now, the thing is, Mike, if they let both walk, which would be slightly surprising, they would have a problem because they see, as we understand it, Milton Williams is more of a third D tackle, not a starter. It's good in that third tackle role. We know Jordan Davis has to be a starter this season. That has to happen. He was the first rounder, was not physically ready, was not good enough physical shape. He had the high ankle sprain. Though they felt, Mike, he started to make some progress before the injury. So he's got to have a great offseason. So they expect him to play a lot of snaps. So there would be a major hole if they don't get if they don't get Cox or Hargrave back. Now, I do expect them to look for a pass rushing defensive tackle, whether it's the draft or free agency. So what happens if they decide to go to free agency? Well, Deron Payne would cost too much. That would be a monster deal. Washington wants him back. That I'm sure they'll try to do all they can to bring him back. So after that, they're just a bunch of run stoppers. They're really, when you really look at, they're no good pass rushers. Michael Brockers, who was cut today, is more of a fourth tackle. He's at the end of the line. He barely played last season. He was weekly inactive for the Lions mostly. There really are no other good pass rushers that would be high end. Now, Jaron Reed's a journeyman, sort of Chiefs, Packers, Seahawks. He could rush the passer. That would be a one-year deal where you could have him as a second tackle, but you're not going to play him a ton of snaps. Other than that, they're a bunch of run game guys. So I think Mike, one of the Cox or Hargrave comes back, and they also look into the draft.
Defensive line, obviously, is an area that they really value a lot. So we'll see if Hargrave gets an extra look there. Fletcher Cox has had a long run with this team. They did the contract later. They cut him, then brought him back. So Fletcher Cox, drafted in 2012. I think he's had a tremendous Eagles career, but we may have seen the last. Hargrave, how much do they value defensive line? We know a lot. Those are the two guys really to keep an eye on. And we mentioned some of the possible people to bring back. They've also got another decision with Brandon Graham. Robert Quinn probably gone. They made that trade with the fourth-round pick. Didn't really get anything from him. But Graham had his most productive numerical season as an Eagle.
Yeah, and they love him in that part-time role. And we should mention, because they've not hired a defensive coordinator, we're expecting that to be done by Monday, barring a surprise. As we understand it, the finalists should be visiting most of these, if not all of the, as we first reported earlier this week, we're done through Zoom. So we should get more clarity on the D coordinator. And by the way, what scheme? Because that's the thing, Mike. Brandon Graham is back to being a sort of a stand-up pass rusher. Quinn he was actually playing with his hand down and standing up. Graham and Quinn really standing up. Quinn won't be back, obviously. What a disaster that trade would turn out to be. I don't blame them for making the trade. We just didn't know that he was going to be so injured. He was basically injured when they got him. But Graham was terrific, as you said, Mike. Now, their edge rushers are clear. It's Reddick and Wet, and they need to develop other guys. And that, to me, that's a position you look at towards the draft. You could look at free agency. Now, if you want to look at free agency, inexpensive guys would be Arden Key, a guy that we really liked. He was with the Jaguars. He's up with the Raiders and Niners. He's a really good third end who could play standing up, play with his hand down. Ebukam, who's with the Niners, who's played at a 34 front. I like him a lot. I think those would be two guys to take a look at, which would not cost you a ton in free agency.
Adam Caplan, football at 4, defensive ends. All right, linebacker. This is an area where they don't value all that much, but they kind of backed into a really good one in T.J. Edwards, and then they signed White for a 1-year deal. So we see both those guys back, one, neither, and if they're not back, then who?
Well, Nakobe Dean, the expectation is he's going to wind up starting now. They look at, as I understand it, they look at Dean more in back of Kaiser White. If Edwards walks, they don't really have a true replacement for him. And again, Dean could play both positions, but they like him more in Kaiser White's weak side position. Here's the deal with T.J. Edwards. We talked about this on our show Inside the Birds a couple weeks ago. If he wants, $10 million a year or more, my sense is they would not re-sign him. It depends, Mike, how reasonable he's willing to be. And I don't listen. The guy's a really good football player. He has all the wherewithal to ask for as much as he wants in free agency. That's what free agency is about. This guy's a former undrafted free agent. What a great story of development. But in Kaiser White, I could see him coming back on a 1-year cheap deal. But again, they'd like to see Dean starting. Certainly both would not be back. Could one be back? Yes. But it depends on how reasonable Edwards is going to be and what the Eagles are willing to pay. But and now if you're looking at free agency,
yeah,
there are so many of them. Bobby Wagner is 33 in June. So if you're 30, you're whatever you are at the beginning of the season is how the league sees you. So he's 33 in NFL years. I wouldn't rule anything out there, but you have to see how things kind of go with their own free agents. There are a ton of them out there. The Eagles don't have to sweat this one out. It's a major buyer's market. There are literally 25 inside linebackers available. For the Eagles, they can do whatever they want.
Yeah, and obviously you mentioned Dean. It'll be interesting to see what role he's used in. A lot of people excited to see what he brings to the table. So much so they even talked to his defensive coordinator from Georgia to maybe pick his brain a little bit on what they can get out of Nakobe Dean. Let's go to James Bradbury, the corner, obviously big name in the corner class. What are we looking at with this situation?
Yeah, but 30 years old in NFL years, the Eagles will have a number in mind. If he wants more than that, they would walk away. They've shown the willingness to walk away. We've noted it with Jordan Hicks. We first reported this a couple years ago. They had a number in mind, and as soon as they found out what he wanted, they never actually made him an offer. The guy, and Greg Cosell does a great job in our free agency deal with him. Greg went over the cornerbacks, and he loves Jamel Dean of the Buccaneers. He's a tall corner who could play zone or man. He's got a little bit of an inconsistency, but he's a good football player. It's actually not a bad group, but the problem is it's sort of top-heavy, then it really drops off. And they're a bunch of older corners. Now, a guy that's a sleeper, and we'll see if Jonathan Gannon wants him back, is Byron Murphy. He's their best corner for the Cardinals. He could play inside or outside. He's a little bit better inside. And then there are a bunch of sort of older corners. But to me, the Eagles, Mike, they have to get younger at the cornerback position. I expect them to draft a corner in the first 2 rounds.
Adam Caplan, football at 4. Let's go to safety, where C.J. Gardner-Johnson, they traded for him. One of the reasons they made that trade and were able to get that trade is because the Saints didn't want to give him a contract. So what's the deal with the contract here? And then, of course, there's Marcus Epps, who, was a huge find for them to get a guy who was a scrap heap guy who becomes a starting player, and then obviously some options if these guys walk.
And don't forget about Epps with Jim Schwartz in Cleveland. Now, we got to see what Cleveland does at safety. Just keep an eye on Jim Schwartz there and don't forget about Jonathan Gannon. Yeah, Epps is going to have a very good market. Epps is going to be one of those players for the Eagles. They'll have a number in mind. If he wants more than they're willing to pay, I could see them walking. And with Gardner-Johnson, And I know NFL Network had a very interesting report someone sent me. I was not aware of this, but I saw it a day ago. They went on record saying that the Eagles are going to make a push to re-sign him, and they have the same information that I have. Basically, is that when they made this trade, my information a little slightly different. They wanted to see how he would get along with the teammates and how he got along with the coaches. He's a super high energy guy. He's a lot of swag and people like this. He was phenomenal. The Eagles do not have a history of walking away from players who are really good at their position, whether they drafted them or not. They just don't do that, unless they've had an injury history or off-the-field stuff. And for what we understand, he connected well with the coaches. He took to their coaching. He stayed in line, and we expect them, as NFL Network also noted, that they're going to make a big push to get him back however they need to do it. They were not in the Jesse Bates market. Remember, we talked about this on your show in the fall. They were not in it. Gardner Johnson was their guy. What a trade that was. And there are a lot of, I'll say this much, Mike, there are a lot of safeties out there. There are a ton of them. In addition to Gardner Johnson and Epps, there are a lot of good ones. So, Mike, quite frankly, it's a buyer's market, but Bates and Gardner Johnson are clearly the two best guys. And, look, there's a reason why Bates has not gotten a deal from the Bengals.
Adam,
he's not been quite the player he once was.
Yeah, Adam Caplan, Football at 4. I mean, Gardner Johnson, Hargrave, and Bradbury, they would be the three biggest decisions, I would guess. Of those three, who's got the best shot at coming back?
Gardner Johnson, just because of his performance. Look, I always say never say never with these things. We've seen teams change their minds, but he's the best of the group by far. He was the best performer. It's too bad he got hurt. Still tied for the lead in interceptions at 6, even after getting hurt. And obviously he's much younger than Hargrave, who's now 30, and that's the other thing. Hargrave is not in the prime of his career. I'm interested to see what. I know some people pegged him at $15 million a year. I cannot believe the Eagles would do something like that. That would surprise me.
Brett Kern, by the way, is a free agent as well. Sipos punted in the Super Bowl, so Kern would be gone. But is Sipos? I mean, they got to find a new punting situation, maybe, right?
Yeah, Sipos is under the last year of his deal. Boy, what a disappointment. I know people wanted him back and Kern gone. Well, they got what they wanted, and it didn't work. He had that shank that led to that big return. So, yeah, they fixed Jake Elliott. He's really good. Lovato's good as their long snapper.
Lovato's a free agent too, by the way.
I think Lovato might. I got to look at his contract situation, see if he's up. But no, actually, it looks like based on what I'm looking at, he's still under contract for another year. And then Britton Covey, by the way, he's a little bit underrated as a returner. I think Covey got better.
All right, Adam, we got the Inside the Birds podcast next week. You got the Intel with Greg Cosell. A lot of stuff getting pumped out by the guys at Inside the Birds. And check out InsideTheBirds.com for more as free agency less than a month away. The Combine next week, and we'll be all over that in just a little bit here on the Sports Bash. All right, Adam, have a good weekend, bud.
Thank you.
All right, Adam Caplan's back next week. Football at 4 is back next week. This is the Sports Bash Live on 97.3 ESPN.